Good morning, Karmi class. I'm still setting up. Of course, I fed the cat. Saga, of course. She's gorgeous. One day I'll catch her upstairs and show you guys her. She is majestic, totally. And update on her health, even though I didn't tell you she was kind of fluffy and soft. She is losing a little bit of weight. I've decided to feed her just a little bit less food because summertime is coming, and if I want a summer body, I'm sure my kitty cat would love to have a summertime fur coat that is to die for, right? Like, let's consider everything. So, I'm doing a light juice this morning, but I came for story time. I came for story time. So, being as though I'm a foodie, I like to explain or like do a little story time about temporary feast or the feast of friends. Okay. So sometimes there'll be seasons in your life where you'll have the feast. And, I want to say the feast will be because we're brought up as social beings, naturally you'll want to invite people to your feast. Maybe I should turn around so that I prefer eye contact when I'm talking because I connect, right? I got my glasses on this morning. So what I was going on to say is when you have feast, you have to be careful who becomes aware of your feast and the ingredients and what you use because some people do come to socialize and fellowship at the feast. However, there are some that come to the feast because of greed and because of status. And sometimes some people come to the feast because they haven't prepared their feast at home or provision, so they look forward to feast to make provision for themselves, not understanding that a feast is usually just that, a feast, a temporary means of supplication and a means to joy and have connectivity, hopefully leaving everybody leaves the feast not only satisfied as far as their bellies full, but with the joy of fellowshipping with one another. However, sometimes you'll get a jester in the feast, and sometimes the jester is tasked with letting everyone know of the feast, but sometimes the jester, which is foolish at times, will pass through the town and not only let the honorable noblemen and the noble women know about the feast, they'll also tell the riffraff. Sometimes everybody will hear word in the street. The gutter rats, the snipes, the scallywags, all of those. They'll hear about the feast, and naturally, everyone who could gain access will come to the feast. But you have to pay attention to the tables at the feast that you set. A lot of the noblemen, if they're deemed upright, they'll all probably flock to one another and they'll make use of the feast. They'll look for good foods and they'll look for good conversation and they'll leave with a better outlook on life. Their bellies will be full, but their minds will be full also. Then you'll have other tables where the people will sit at the table only to spy what others eat. Don't let that go over your head. There are some that will sit at the table only to spy what others are consuming. And once they see how the food satisfies the company that they're keeping, that is when they'll pick what their palate is. For they really have no palate of their own. They're just there to pick other people's palate. And then you may get the, I want to say the lackadaisical bunch. They come with deep pockets. Yes, they came to feast and fellowship, but they also come to take that they might take some back because they have no provision of their own because they have not mastered their houses. So they've basically come not only just in greed, but they've come to take away. They've come to steal. Or you might have the occasionable so-called honorable man who comes to take advantage of the feast. They'll come with gifts in hand, but the gifts are hollow. So really, while they've presented themselves as someone who's come to join the feast and provide provision with the feast, they've actually made false backs and are actually on the back end filling up their coffers as well to leave the feast. But the bad thing about this is when you fill your coffers on the back end, you have no you don't know how long the food has been out. So if you fill your coffers before you leave the party and you tell yourself that you've already got plans to, I guess, take from the guest unknown, you don't know how long you've had that food in the coffers and it might spoil. So that you might take back unclean food to wherever your house is and taint it because you did so with ill intent and you let no one you published it to no one that you had this intent to take this food, else you might have gotten advice on the time frame in which you should do to take care and preserve the food. But because you kept your mouth shut, you've now taken spoiled food. Be careful of the feast and be careful of your intentions when you go to the feast. Sometimes people use utensils at the feast because they want to keep their hands clean, although they might be eating dirty, spoiled food. So you pay attention to the tables at the feast. A lot of times, the person who hosts the feast, they get satisfaction regardless of who comes to the table because all company means that everyone knows where the house is. And if everyone knows where the house is and everybody's coming to the house for the feast, they know the feast isn't empty. And they also know that the food is good. But as I wind this foodie story up, a feast is a feast. The feast doesn't last forever. So once the host closes the door, they make plans for the next feast. And most times when the host is watching the tables, they know exactly who not to invite again. This has been Karmi class. Make sure you know who's at your table.